Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teams from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are with episode 11 of the Principles of Performance podcast. I'm your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my partner in crime, Mike Perry. And we have a very special guest. We continue to luck out with our guests here in the start of our show here, Mike. We have Dr. Greg Rose with us, good friend of ours who is a board certified doctor of chiropractic, holds an undergraduate degree in engineering from University of Maryland, specializes in 3D biomechanics, strength and conditioning, manual therapy, rehab, nutritional supplementation, and therapeutic exercise as it relates to golf. Most people know him as a golf guy. He's a co-host of Golf Fitness Academy and co-founder of the Titleist Performance Institute out at Oceanside, California, which if you've not had the chance to go out there, it is an experience, as well as On Base University for baseball and softball and Racket Fit for tennis. He's also a certified chiropractic sports practitioner and fellow in the International Academy of Clinical Acupuncture.
You're going to read all that stuff, man?
Yeah, I only got another about 45 minutes, Greg. Utilizing his background in engineering combined with his expertise on the human body, Greg has helped pioneer a field of analyzing computerized 3D motion captures of the golf swing. And so I could go on, but Dr. Greg Rose, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm noticing the ones on either side of your head. So the one jerseys, and this is episode 11. I'm seeing a theme here. I should be excited to be number 11.
Play that in the lottery, yes.
I know, yes, Mike likes those ones on either side of you.
Yes, you know, and in case you don't remember who those Super Bowl jerseys are from, they are from beating the New England Patriots twice.
So how much did you pay for those off of eBay? No one's number one. Let's be honest. No one on the team is number one. So you got that. You got custom jerseys. I'm surprised they don't say DeGatti on the back.
That would have been extra. I maxed out the budget on that. So let's not waste our time squabbling here, Perry. We could do that all day. Let's talk about Dr. Greg Rose, because
unfortunately, I should say Redskin. I'm a Commanders fan, which that's where I grew up with, so I have nothing to brag about. But go ahead, keep going.
Not for a long time. But here's something that I that you definitely can brag about, Greg. It's been a very interesting journey that I don't think a lot of people know about. They kind of see, where you are now with TPI, but kind of going from being an engineer to a chiropractor to golf fitness to starting TPI, and then now On Base and Racket Fit. You
never know what you're going to be when you grow up. That's the bottom line.
And so it's not only a very interesting journey, but I think it's to kind of, tell you how, in terms of what I look at as a true American success story, in terms of how you've kind of come from all those different places and gotten to where you are. So kind of walk us through how someone goes from an engineer to where you are now.
Well, I appreciate that, buddy. But, I feel like, like I said, you never know what you're going to be when you grow up, and you have to take opportunities that seem exciting. And I've always felt that if you're going to be successful, you have to outwork your competition. Some people get lucky and hit the lottery, but most people don't. And I always say the people that are successful have worked their tail off. I know both of you guys have worked your butt off. And I felt like from an early age that if I was going to be successful, I had to work really hard. And for me to work really hard, I didn't want it to be work. I wanted it to be fun, right? So I felt like the most important thing in life is to do something you love, because then you can outwork anybody, because it's not work. And when I went to engineering, it was my dad was in the construction world, and he was like, engineers are what we pay the most. It'd be great if you were an engineer. So I was like, okay, Pops, I'll go be an engineer. And I went in there, and after the first year, I realized this is definitely not what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? So it was I don't want to say it was a waste of time, because engineering teaches you how to think, put systems down on paper, make sure they can go through. And it was like when you take a test in engineering, it was so crazy. It was like they would teach you how to build a roof, right? And then you go in to take a test and they'd say, okay, you're going to build a roof, but now there's going to be 40 feet of snow and it's in Alaska. And you're like, well, we never looked at snow loads. And they're like, I just want to see, write it down how you think you would figure this out. So there was no right answer because we didn't know the answer. They just wanted to see your logic. So to me, it was frustrating, but you'll see it. I mean, I use that every day in my career now, right? So I decided in my junior year that I wanted to do something different, decided to go into medicine, got my pre-med minor, graduated engineering from University of Maryland, went off to chiropractic school. And chiropractic school was the complete opposite. It was kind of, sorry, you can hear my dogs in the background. Apologize for that. But the engineering school, like I said, was all about, no right answer, just think your way through it. Chiropractic school and most medical schools, it's just memorization, right? Just what bones are there, what arteries are there, and it was the test. I was like, man, this is simple. All I got to do is memorize stuff, and it was very different. And but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Became a chiropractor, and I knew when I was at the University of Maryland going engineering that I loved golf. Right, I worked at the golf course there. Fell in love with it at Maryland. I became a scratch golfer when I was in Maryland, so I became a pretty good golfer. And when I went to chiropractic school, I was like, all right, I love this. I go, but the dream, again, talking about doing something you love, would be, why not be a chiropractor for just golfers? And everybody told me I was crazy. But, 5 years later, I had a practice with over 3,000 golfers from all over the world. And I built a practice called Advantage Golf in Washington, D.C. area where I grew up. And it went crazy. And I think part of that was luck. I think a lot of success has to do with luck, too. I started my practice in 1996. You know who else started in 1996? You guys know?
I do. Mike, do you know? Mike's an MMA guy.
No, I just watch people beat each other up.
Mr. Tiger Woods started in 1996. I tell you, I think I got lucky because when Tiger started, everybody was like, man, this guy's different. Like, look at, he's like an athlete. Like, does anybody know anything about his athletic development? I was really one of the only people in the world really focusing on that. And so I always say I should write Tiger a check every day because it really, he sparked this entire industry, and I was just the right place at the right time and started getting a lot of players. And then the rest is history. In 2000, I was, like I said, in the Washington, D.C. area, a young top 100 golf instructor, the youngest golf instructor to be top 100, came to my area in Baltimore, Maryland at Cays Valley. His name is Dave Phillips. He built an incredible learning center there. And one day he brought this 9-year-old in to see me. And he was like, this is a really important client of mine. I'd love for you to put him on a conditioning program. So I went through, his dad and him showed up, took him through the 3D biomechanics stuff that I was doing a lot of research on, took him through the physical testing. And lo and behold, the dad was the CEO of Titleist. And that was Peter Uihlein, who's now on the Live Tour, right? And it basically, Wally Uihlein, the CEO, was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And he was like, he looked at Dave and I, and he was like, guys, I don't know if you understand this. He goes, but we sell our primary products, golf balls. We also sell golf clubs. He goes, but the average golfer loses 5 to 6 golf balls every time they play. And he goes, we own over 50% of the ball market. He goes, we're always looking for things to extend the life of golfers, make them play longer, enjoy the game more, because if they do that, it's billions of dollars. And he goes, I love what you're doing, and we'd like to help. And it turned into this great consulting arrangement. And then basically in 2002, he approached Dave and I and said, hey, we've got this facility in San Diego. I'm curious, all these other sports teams take care of their players physically. We don't do that. And I'm curious if you guys would like to help us do that. So we, as consultants, helped design this Titleist Performance Institute. And he turned around after we designed it and he said, I got a deal for you. He goes, I'll build it. I love it. He goes, if you guys quit your jobs and come run this. He had to twist our arms. And next thing you know, now Dave and I became the head of health and fitness and performance for Titleist. And we've been there ever since 2003 in San Diego. Got a beautiful 33-acre facility. We're actually under construction right now, doing a $15 million upgrade, which is pretty awesome. And Titleist has been such a great partner. I'm always interested in research and development, and it's led us into some really cool stuff. And now, what's kind of interesting, ESPN was doing, they did a study on sports science centers, and everybody looked at us as golf center, but we were treating lots of different athletes as well. And we get lots of cool toys there, lots of technology. And we're now ranked as one of the top 5 sports science centers in the world. So not just golf, but baseball and tennis and football. We see all the above. That's kind of how I got here.
It is a very cool, inspirational story. Two take homes that I would say for the listeners is number one, Greg is part cyborg, so I can attest to his hard working that I've never seen anything quite like it.
Vampire. They call me the vampire.
Yeah, I mean, you were teaching a course virtually in China till probably a couple hours ago overnight, right? And then two is I don't want the people to get the impression to start bringing your 9-year-olds to us for biomechanical evaluation unless your dad is the CEO of a major.
Come on,
Yes.
man. We
Yeah,
see kids
unless
do
your
that.
father's the CEO of a major corporation and wants to build something like TPI, wait till they're a little older than 9.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, Greg. How has your engineering background helped you develop systems for problem solving, training, treatment, et cetera?
Well, I'll tell you a great story. So obviously a mutual friend of ours, Greg Cook, founder of FMS, in 1996, he also started as well. And he actually came up to my facility. He was doing a lecture in Baltimore. That's when I first saw him, and he had like 30 tests that he was trying to come up with this functional movement screen. And you know, I loved the way his brain thought, right? And him coming with these movement screens. And if I fast forward, at one point I was like, I want to do like a functional movement screen for health, for people in pain. And Gray was like, hey, I've kind of been working on something called the SFMA, right? This is a medical version of our FMS. He's like, I think you'll like it. And I was like, cool, can I check it out? And he showed me what he was working on. And I always say, like, Gray is like Henry Ford, right? So he was like, hey, I got this cool idea, and it's called an automobile. And I'm like, what's an automobile? And he's like, hey, let me take it for a test drive. And we get in it, and it's cool. It starts to drive, but then the front tire falls off, and then smoke starts coming out. And I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, but there's some problems with your car, right? So what I do is I take it and I kind of take my engineering brain and I go, okay, let's just put out the roadmap of, like, you know, how do you build this so that there's no holes, there's no mistake. And that's kind of what I do, right? So I take things, I pick them apart. I call myself the juice extractor. Like, if you've got something really good, I can extract the juice from you and then put it in something that will preserve it and make sure that it stays there. And I think that's what I learned from engineering, right? Is create these, you know, if you guys are familiar with the SFMA, if you're watching this, I'm the bastard who made the flowcharts, right? So that's, you know, some people hate that, some people love that, but that's my brain right there, is those systems.
Very cool.
So speaking of systems, you talked about some of the tech like 3D motion capture, force plates, high-speed video. How much has that changed your approach in terms of preparing athletes from the early days and then even till now? And then the second part of that question is, where does the art of coaching still fit in when you have all that tech at your disposal?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I always like to say, you know, we work in all different sports. I know you guys do as well. And I always feel like golf and probably Formula One are the most advanced when it comes to technology. And I say that because if you look at most sports like baseball, football, basketball, those sports are run by owners. I mean, really, those are the guys with the money. And if you look at the owners' budgets, the biggest budget is for players, right? Their player budgets are enormous, right? Their development budgets are pretty small, and their research budgets are pretty small compared to their player budgets. Well, in golf and like in Formula One, we don't have owners, we have manufacturers. Manufacturers don't have monstrous player budgets, they have monstrous R&D budgets, right? So it allows us to get all kinds of cool technology. And that's what's really cool about being there at Titleist, is we're always trying to figure out tools that we can use to learn new things and gain better advantages on the competition, right? And so when I got there, you know, it was kind of like, hey, let's go figure out how we can learn as much information as possible. And the other really cool thing about the golf world and Titleist is most places, as they learn stuff, they try and keep it. You know, like, I'm sure, Eric, when you were with the Giants, if there was something that was like the secret sauce, they're like, don't tell anybody, right? We see this in all the sports, right? But Titleist was like, well, why would we keep this to ourselves? Like, tell everybody, because they'll make them play better and they'll buy more golf balls, right? So it's been really unique that anything we learn, we can actually teach and do stuff. So the technology has allowed us to understand how athletes move, how they create power, how they transfer power, how they create force. I always say, if you're going to work with an athlete, you got to know what, why, and how, right? You got to know what they're doing. To do that, you can use your eyes, video cameras. We can use advanced biomechanics, 3D motion capture. Those are all tells me what the athlete's doing, right? Then I kind of want to know how they're doing it. How they're doing it is usually coming from ground reaction forces. That's your force plates, pressure plates. Lets me know how they push from the ground and how those torques are created and how it makes the athlete move. And then the why, something that we specialize here, is probably the physical. This is why they move the way they move, maybe mental, what they're thinking. But all of those pieces, the what, why, and how, the technology can help you as a coach understand those things faster and more accurately, right? Now, what's really important in my mind is the technology is not really for the athlete, it's for the coach. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people take. They get all these cool technology and they give it to the client. It's like going to get an MRI and the doctor goes, here's your scans. People will be like, hey, this is cool. I don't know how to read this, right? The MRI is for the doctor. The doctor then takes that and tells the client what they have. It's the same thing with technology. I feel like you should get technology if you need help diagnosing and figuring out what's going on, right? So the tools are for you, they're not a marketing tool for your clients. You can have all the greatest technology, but if you don't know what you're doing, nobody's going to come see you, right? Now, like you said, the art of coaching, to me, the art of coaching is how do you take that information, become a better coach, and now deliver it in 3rd to 5th grade terms. I always feel like the key of great coaching is anybody can understand what you're doing. A lot of people get technology, and Eric, Mike, you guys have seen these people. It's like they speak a foreign language, and the players or the athletes don't know what the hell they're talking about. I feel like you want to take all that complex stuff, get the diagnosis, and then remember, talk to 3rd grade. And that, to me, is the art of creating the relationship, making the understanding, and then the buy-in from the athlete, and they're all in. Now, because I think the technology gives the athlete a lot of buy-in, that you're not just guessing, you're actually using data and you understand exactly where the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time now that it's become at lower price points that your baseball school down the street can start getting some of this stuff, because I work a lot in baseball. Is that, the knock that I'm getting when players come to me is they say, look, I went to this place and they did this hour evaluation on me, but when I got to my training program, I was doing the same thing as everybody else, right? It didn't actually impact my program at all. And then they never went back to test it.
By the way, it's horrible. That's horrendous, right?
Yeah, so, and they don't retest it, because that actually puts your feet to the fire, right? That tests your work. And, like you always talk about 3D motion capture being the bullshit, detector, right?
It's the same thing with the movement screen, right? How many times do you see people do a movement screen and they still give them the same workout? Like, what did you do the screen for? Just to say you did a screen? Like, you know what I mean? Like, everything should be customized based on this. Again, that's just saying that I'm not sure if the coach or the trainer really understands how to interpret the data.
Yeah, it was just a tack on for their evaluation.
Yeah. Another big problem we've seen in sports, which I think is really interesting, is like I said, I've had the pleasure of going to so many different sports federations, leagues, and I always tell a story. I was invited in China to the Table Tennis Association, and I don't know anything about table tennis, but I know they haven't lost a gold medal in like forever, right? So I know they're the best. So I go out to their testing facility in Beijing, and I sit down, and they have 10 coaches that come out. There's supposedly 10 of the best table tennis coaches in the world, right? And they look at me and they go, thanks for coming. We know you're a sports science guy. There are 10 things that we think are the most important for looking at for table tennis. Could you help us measure these 10 things? And I'm like, perfect. What are they? And they lay them down. And then me and a couple other nerds go away, and we try and come back and give them what they want, right? That makes sense. Let me tell you about baseball, right? Baseball, even football a little bit. Like baseball, it's like you go to a team, and here's what they did. They go, I love data. I love technology. I think this is great. And we see other sports doing this. So they go hire a technology person. And they sit the technology person down, the coaches, and they go, so what should we measure? And the technology person goes, you're asking me? Like, I'm a technology guy. I don't know anything about baseball. Like, you're supposed to tell me. And it's almost like they put the cart before the horse. And now we get all these data scientists, technology, and data coming to the coaches that the coaches don't even know what the heck it is. They're like, I don't even know what this is. But the data person didn't want to admit that they didn't know anything about baseball. So they just said, hey, this is something that I was really good at in track and field. I think you might like it too. And you get all kinds of crap out there. And it's not crap for the data's not crap. Data's great. I just don't know if it applies to baseball, right? So we got to be careful who's driving the technology.
Absolutely. So shifting gears a little bit about some of your influences, and I know I've heard you speak about the time you got to learn from Dr. Schmidt about motor learning. And
one of the greatest men in the world. Yep.
And his schema for motor learning, and how does that apply beyond just obviously for skill acquisition, but also where a strength coach, personal trainer can apply that into their fitness programming?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of traveling the globe with Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Lee, two of the most published researchers on motor learning in the world, for almost 3.5 years. And I'm telling you, I learned probably more with those guys in those 3 years than I have in almost all my career. And they were all their research was on motor learning, creating a motor skill, right? From playing a piano to throwing a baseball, it's all skill stuff. And I kept asking them too, I'm like, can you apply this to workouts, to fitness? Like, because people are trying to learn new motor patterns. Like if you've lost hip extension and now your hip doesn't extend, so what do? You substitute lumbar extension, and now you herniate your disc in your lower back. We can go rehab that lower back, but if you now still have a motor pattern that you use lumbar extension instead of hip extension, we have to break a motor pattern, right? And I'm like, this seems like it should apply the exact same. And he was like, absolutely, there is no difference, right? Is that the way humans learn is the way humans learn, whether it's learning how to extend your hip with lumbar stability or learning how to use an ATM machine, it doesn't matter. Humans learn the same. And what's amazing to me is there's so much research on motor learning that is violated every day in the gyms all over the world, right? From the basic concepts of muscles don't have memory, it's your brain. From trying to think you're training muscles versus training the brain is very, very different. And again, listen, if you're just trying to get stronger, if you want to be bodybuilder, okay, you're training muscle, right? There's no motor pattern, just getting stronger. I'm talking about function, right? If you're trying to function better, if you want to, your movement patterns improve, that's motor skills, right? So just because they have the mobility, right? Just because they have the range of motion, just because they have the strength, does not mean that they're going to fire their motor pattern sequencing the appropriate way. And to me, it's like the finishing of your rehab, right? Is to make sure that the athlete doesn't need you to coach them, that they understand how to function subconsciously to be able to do this. And all those motor learning principles, I don't know how many of those you want to go through, but we can go through a bunch of those, I feel like one of the most valuable things for a trainer. It should be almost required learning.
Now, I know some of that got misinterpreted. Just to give one example, is I know with Malcolm Gladwell's book talking about the 10,000 hour rule, when that was kind of an extrapolation, right, of research that was done, that's not quite accurate. If you took you 10,000 hours to learn every time you did a deadlift, no one would ever do a deadlift.
Well, okay, so that's 10,000 hours was to be an expert, right? So if you wanted to be an expert, he was saying that, and most of the research will say, and I think what's good about this is an expert, it'd be like, it's like the difference between a Formula One driver and you can drive your car, right? Listen, I think the three of us have probably had 10,000 hours behind a wheel. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, half the time,
that's how long it takes me to commute to work in New Jersey.
Exactly. You're in New York. So I look at this and I go, listen, there's been days where I should ready to go drive Formula One, right? So I've had 10,000 hours plus, but I'm not a Formula One driver because I wasn't trying to apply the skill to a very specific sports application, right? So what we know is that the 10,000 hour rule I love, which says to me is you're not going to become a pro in 6 months, okay? It takes time to develop, and every sport has different, averages of how long it takes to develop. And to do it, you have to do what's called deliberate practice, deliberate learning. You have to literally try and make sure that the hours you're doing are the right type of hours, the right type of practice. And I also feel like it's important to think of this way is we're not trying to become experts, right? I don't want you to become the expert at movement, but I want normal movement, right? So if an expert takes 10,000 hours,
So
makes sense?
let me ask you this, Greg. So it seems like, the idea of deliberate practice versus exposure, right? I mean, like you said, anybody can drive a car, but like I've done that too. I'm like, how the hell did I get from here to Rhode Island? I didn't remember driving. So it's not about exposure. It's about specificity and being deliberate with the task at hand.
100%. It's like the difference between throwing and pitching, right? Anybody can throw a ball against a wall, but to throw it with velocity through a strike zone, if there's rules, there's consequences, stuff like that, it's just different. Now, as they start getting better, we start creating drills, and this is deliberate practice and things to improve your skills, specifically created by a coach to induce development and learning. And sometimes it's not as enjoyable; it's more repetitious over there, but that's what it takes.
if there was only like some sort of said principle that, allowed that to happen.
Yeah, that would be great.
So let's keep going with the motor learning thing. So now one of the big knocks on the corrective exercise world is that, well, it doesn't stick, right? And I think a lot of that is just poor application of that. But
100%.
if basically what we're looking for, and we had Charlie Weingroff on a couple episodes ago talking about, can you at least create that window of change, and then from there, I got to be able to run
Did he have the mohawk going?
He did.
Yeah, he had that all going. Yeah, he actually rapped the Humpty Dance. So you're gonna have to top that.
Okay, it's not gonna happen. But go ahead, keep going. Back to your question. Okay.
So with that, like, okay, so I've made a change. I taught you how to get to use your reference before. I taught you how to get in a hip extension. Like, okay, how long is that going to stick? Okay, and then once that stick, how do I reinforce that? And then when does that then become a habit?
So you're saying exactly what I just said, just a little better, which is basically understanding that once you have the ability, does not mean you have the motor skill, right? So I think a lot of people go, oh, these corrective exercises didn't do anything. I'm like, what were you using them for? Were you using them to just get them range of motion, or were you using it to build a motor pattern? Because those are different, right? And you have to do both if you want this to see the value of this. So first of all, you have to create the ability, right? So a lot of these corrective ones is giving you the ability to extend your hip, giving you the ability to do whatever you're working on. Once they have the ability, now you need to apply the motor learning skills to create the motor pattern, right? This is like going to random practice and making sure it's field-based, not form-based, and all the rules that apply, and trying to reduce your feedback, right? So error detection learning systems for your clients to make sure they know if they're doing it wrong or right. These are the ways that you release your client out into the world feeling safe.
And we totally screw that up by overcoaching, don't we?
Like I said, whoever talks the most loses when it comes to motor learning, right? So as young coaches, they're always talking, trying to, after every rep, giving them feedback, where the experienced coaches, they don't talk a lot, but when they talk, it matters. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, so one of the things that you had mentioned was sort of random practice, and the idea, I forget what the name of the book was, but it was about the idea of interleaving those skills, like, versus block learning versus interleaving, where block learning, you do an A skill, a B skill, and then a C skill, and you only practice it in that order. But at some point, if you really want to own that information, you have to go CBA or BCA. You have to do it at random. Do you feel like that is accurate in that world, or what's your thoughts on that?
Mike, I can talk about this for 20 hours. So I'm gonna refer to Dr. Schmidt. So listen, Dr. Schmidt, he had before he passed away, he knew he was going to die. He had a disorder, and he was wheelchair bound. And I asked him to come in, and I was like, "Can I do an interview with you?" Because I knew he didn't have much time. And I actually interviewed him 10 days before he died on video. And I got to the point where I said to him, I said, "Hey, I'm just curious, when is it okay to use block practice? Like, tell me when can you apply block practice or random practice?" And I swear to you, we never put this out because his speech was a little impaired, and I just didn't think it'd be great to publish this, but I should at some point. He looks at the camera and he says, "There's no way you're going to get me to say that you should ever do block practice before I die," which is like, I'll never forget that statement. Now, I totally disagree, right? And I think there are places where you can use block practice, but that's just how passionate one of the leading researchers in the world was about the difference between random and block. And here's why. Let me explain where he's coming from, and then I can tell you where I would use block versus random. So listen, mathematics is the easiest way to understand this, right? So if I said, "Hey, are you guys good with multiplication?"
I'm deferring to Mike here.
I'm deferring to Eric on this. I got 10 fingers, and that's all I can do right now. So
okay, so if I said, "What's 12 times 15?" Who's got it? 12 times 15. Don't use your calculator.
130.
Use a paper if you need to. 12 times 15. Eric?
180.
180. Giants beat the Patriots again. What is going on?
Hey, that's it. I'm telling you, I'm telling.
He's been hitting the head too many times on that mat.
180. Listen, most people, if you give them a multiplication like that, they're, I got to figure this out. And both of you guys had that look. It took you a little bit. We finally got to 180. Okay, let's practice multiplication. Let's do it again. What's 12 times 15?
180.
Wow, you guys are getting better, right? All right, what's 12 times 15? Now, listen, I can keep doing block practice, 12 times 15. Do you think you're learning math?
No, we're memorizing the structure of the conversation.
You had previous information. You already knew the solution. You didn't have to go try and do the math in your head. Like the first time you went, your eyes went up and you started trying to do math in your head, right?
And it was terrible.
The second time you were just like, the second time was like, is that the same numbers he just asked me? Like, hey, that sounds like 180. Now, it's obvious that if you just did block practice with mathematics, you're going to suck at math unless the quiz is 12 times 15, then you're going to be amazing, right? But let's take that to the same thing. Let's take that to free throws. Okay, so let's say you're Shaquille O'Neal and you're struggling with free throws. So what's the normal thought is, I'm just going to go do 1,000,000 free throws in a row, right? That's doing 12 times 15, 1,000,000 times in a row. You're still going to suck at doing free throws because the first free throw, you practiced one. But now if you hit the rim, the short side of the rim, you're like, I need more energy. Well, now you have previous information that you didn't have the first time. And you use that previous information to dial in your speed, and maybe I'd dial in my trajectory. But when you go to do a shot, like any other shot, like it doesn't help you with your shooting skills, if that makes sense. So the best way to learn is random. Like if I get on a bike, if I go and I follow the right, I get up, and next thing you know, I usually follow the left because you're trying to adjust, and you never know where the bumps are going to come. And that's the way humans learn is through random practice. So I'll tell you one more great story, and then I'll talk about block practice. Patrick Harrington, who's probably one of the hottest players on the Champions Tour right now, Ryder Cup captain, 3-time major champion. He had a great friend growing up, one of his best friends. And his best friend is on the Challenge Tour, which is like the mini tour for the European Tour. And they came into TPI one time. Patrick already won his 3 majors, him and his friend. And Patrick goes off to get club fit. And hey, now that he's gone, can I talk to you in your office? So in the office, and I'm like, what's up? He goes, I just want to tell you about some frustrations I've had. And I've never told this to anybody, but I think maybe you can help me. I'm like, what's up? He goes, listen, he goes, I grew up with Patrick because, we practice all the time together. And I was always better than him. I used to beat him. And then, now look at him, everybody knows him. Nobody knows who I am. And I go, well, sometimes guys bloom late, that's very normal. And he's like, no, he goes, that's not the problem. He goes, the problem is I still practice more than he does. Like I put in more work, more effort. And I don't understand why he's having success. And I go, you practice more than Patrick Harrington? Because listen, I worked with Patrick for 20 years. And I'm like, I don't know anybody who practices more than Patrick Harrington. And I'm like, there's no way you practice more. And he goes, Greg, for example, this morning, he goes, we came out here early and we practiced putting. He goes, we do this all the time. He goes, I will go out there on the putting green and I will putt 100 putts from 5 feet, and then 100 putts from 7 feet, and then 100 putts from 9 feet. Like I'll hit 300 putts. And at that same time, he goes, it takes me like 20 minutes to do this. Patrick just has one ball and he just putts different holes. Like he probably makes 30, 40 putts and I do 300 and he's a better putter than me. And I go, well, now you just explained everything, right? You're doing block practice. So you did 3 putts and he did 30. He goes, no, I did 300. I go, no, you don't understand. You did 3. You did 3 math formulas. You just did it 100 times each, which means there's absolutely no learning going on. So I had to have this conversation with them of random versus block. And it always comes down, if you look at the best athletes in the world, sometimes they don't even know they're doing this. They are randomizing their practice when they're learning. Now, when is block practice good? Okay, let's say the 3 of us, we're going to have a free throw contest, right? Like I said, if we're going to have a contest of 12 times 15, dude, all we got to do is practice 12 times 15, and I'm going to be a rock star. If we're going to do a free throw contest in an hour, and Eric just does free throws, and Mike, you and I are all over the court hitting shots, in an hour, Eric's going to kick our ass because he's got this dialed in right now from block practice. So block practice is great at performing right now in practice. 2 days later, Eric's probably not going to be as good as hitting shots around the court as you and I are because we practice all these random ones. But in an hour, he's going to win the free throw contest. So think about like before you play, if you look at the PGA Tour on the driving range, they're doing block shots. And people are like, well, why are they doing block practice on the range? I'm like, because they're about to go perform. They're about to go try and do free throws. They're not trying to learn anything before the event. When they're trying to learn in practice, it's very different how we do random practice, right? So block practice is great if you need to perform well in practice, but not learning, just perform well in practice. Number 2, it's also great if you're learning a new skill. The first time you ever try something, you need to understand what you're doing, right? So if I say, hey, I want you to do a bird dog, but don't arch your back, right? It's okay to do 5 or 10 block practice ones just to make sure that you understand what you're supposed to do before I go randomize it. Before I try and make you fall off the bike, I need to make sure you understand you're supposed to stay on the bike and make sure we're on the same page. So block practice, I think, is great at learning a new skill. So I think it's great at learning a new skill, and I think it's good at warming up to go perform today. Other than that, the research is very clear, and Dr. Schmidt made it very clear. You should always do random practice if you want to learn.
And
Wow.
I see a lot of carryover into what we do, because obviously the easy takeaway is how this applies to sport, whether, how I'm going to go, learn how to hit a baseball. But I think there's not enough of it in our world, whether it's on the fitness side in terms of preparation, and preparing you for actually going out and playing your sport, or even on the rehab side. So I have a pro soccer player I was working with this morning, and what trying to explain to him, trying to build up your layers of reactivity. First, it's okay, you're going to run, break down at the cone. Then you're going to run, you don't know when you're going to break down, and then you don't know which direction you're going to break down, and then building up those layers.
Yeah.
And I think in our return to play protocols miss a lot of that, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's two very important things, right? If you want to apply this to your exercise. So number one, and you guys hear this all the time, is somebody will say, hey, what's your favorite exercise for hip mobility? Or what's your favorite exercise for core strength type of stuff? If you're going to randomize your workouts, you can't have one exercise. It has to be multiple exercises, right? So if I'm going to work on hip extension, right, I need to give you 4, 5, 6 exercises that you're going to randomize those exercises. Instead of one exercise and doing 10 reps of 2 sets, right? That's block practice. That's basically, I'm doing 12 times 15 again, 20 times, right? Instead, I might say, okay, here's a bridge, here's rolling prone to supine, here's a bird dog, here's a deadlift. These are all extension patterns of the hip that I can randomize so I can do 1 or 2 reps of each and then keep going. I want to keep changing the brain to have to relearn the skill. I don't want to keep doing the same one. That's really, really, really important. And then the second most important thing is error detection software, right? The client has to know if they screwed up, right? Like if you're on the mound and you throw a pitch and you were trying to throw a fastball high with spin and it keeps hovering low over the plate, you need to be able to error detect what's going on and be able to make adjustments. It's the same thing in fitness. Like, are you confident that they're doing that exercise properly and they can feel what it feels like to do the right motor pattern? So you need to make sure you train your client. All right, this is what hip extension feels like when you don't use your lumbar spine. And as a trainer, I'm always sitting there watching them. And if I say, listen, you got 2 jobs. Do the exercise and try and maintain the feel we talked about. But most importantly is error detect. If you did it wrong, just go, man, that was bad. My bad, coach. Let me fix it. And I'm going to watch you. If you screw up and I see you screw up and you go, oh, that one was bad, dude, that's awesome. You're error detecting. You're learning. But if you screw up and you don't say anything, well, now I haven't done my job because now you can't error detect and now you're just practicing bad patterns again. So random exercise, multiple exercises for each function you're trying to do, and then create the error detection system. Those are the 2 things that are missed all over the world for training.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the TPI model, because I think there's elegance in that we don't see enough of in other sports in terms of there's medical, there's the skill, and then there's the performance side of it, and how we work across silos in between those. And tell me kind of how that came to be and where you see that working well, obviously in golf, and where it's not working well.
Yeah, well, you just said the key word there, silos, right? So typically in sports, you've got your 3 silos. You've got health, medical, you've got strength conditioning, and you've got coaches, right? And baseball is perfect for this. I mean, I can't tell you, we've done in-services for 16 of the MLB teams, and I can't tell you how many times I go in there. And health hates strength and conditioning. Medical, and they don't like each other, right? And they don't talk to each other. And neither one of them talk to the coaches because the coaches don't even believe that this helps. So you got 3 total silos. You got a pitcher walks in to the coach and the coach goes, we got to work on this front side. Your front side's soft. And you're like, okay, well, maybe I'll just go to the gym and talk to the fitness guys. Coach doesn't come with them. They just walk into the gym and they go to the strength conditioning coach and they go, hey, I want to work on my pitching. The fitness says, perfect, let's do an evaluation. They do evaluation. They go, dude, your biggest problem is your shoulder strength. We got to work on your shoulder strength. And you're like, shoulder strength? My coach said it was my front side. Okay. You know, I'm going to go to the medical, just get checked out. So they go to the medical and the medical person does an evaluation. They go, dude, your neck, man, this is all about your neck. Your neck's the problem, right? I mean, how many times have you seen this, right? So now the player's going, okay, coach says it's my front leg. Strength conditioning says it's my right shoulder strength. And medical says it's my neck. And you're going, two of these people are wrong and don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they're all part of my team. Like, I don't know if I can trust these. I don't know what's going on. Now you got the little angel and the devil that pops up, right? You got the angel that goes, it's okay. They're all right. And the devil's like, no, two of them don't know what they're talking about. Maybe all three of them don't know what you're talking about. And they get doubt. So what do? They go to Driveline, or they come to us, or they go to you guys. They leave their team, and because they're like, I'm getting 13 different messages. And the main problem is they're in silos, right? The team is in silos and they're not acting like a team. So our philosophy is very simple. We believe the sphere of influence that goes around a player, coach, medical, and fitness need to work as a cohesive unit, right? This is like, we still stole this from Formula One. There is no way you're going to win a Formula One race without the driver, the pit crew, the management all talking to each other. I mean, the freaking guy's got a microphone talking to the pit crew. And when he pulls into the pit stop, the fitness, let's call that the pit crew is your fitness model. They have 2 seconds. You know, how do they do in 2 seconds what they need to do without 100% understanding what's happening with the car? So the coach is literally telling them as they're driving, this is what's happening. So when they pull in, they work on exactly what the coach is working on, and the car performs great. So take that analogy to sports. The athlete's the car, right? The coach is the driver, and the medical and fitness, that's pit crew, right? If they don't communicate with each other, I don't understand how you're working as a team and the car never performs great. And the other thing that's really important for strength and conditioning to understand is you could be standing on the track, waving your arms going, dude, there's smoke coming out of your tailpipe. You got a flat tire. If the coach, the driver, doesn't turn the wheel into the pit stop, it's not coming to you. It just keeps going, right? So without this constant communication and this teamwork approach, it just doesn't work. And it's so obvious when you go to teams that suck, they're siloed. When you go to teams that are great, it's obvious. That's what they do.
It seems like the big limitation here is just the fact that they aren't working as one cohesive unit, and it's all these different individuals that are trying to. You got to wonder how. Let me ask you this: how much of that you think is ego?
Well, it's even worse. Okay, so communication is for sure the problem, right? Half the time they hate each other, but they're saying the same thing. They just don't even know they're saying the same thing. They actually 100% agree with each other. They just aren't communicating with each other. And ego is not really the issue. It's job preservation, right? So a lot of times it's kind of like, sometimes, I hate to say it, sometimes they don't want people to know if they don't know what they're doing, or they don't want to rock the boat because they're just trying to keep their job. But to me, how do you keep your job? Win the World Series, win the Super Bowl. That's how you keep your job, right?
Yeah, success, right? That always helps.
That always helps.
Kind of switching gears, when we look at rotational sports like tennis, golf, softball, baseball, what are the similarities and what are the differences?
You know, obviously we do movement screens for each of these sports, right? And we have certain core movement screens that I don't even care what the sport is, need to do this, right? So there are certain fundamentals, and I always get back to style versus efficiency, right? When you go to most coaches have what we call a style bias. Like, once again, let's go hitting. Let's say you're a hitter, and you go to a coach, the coach might go, well, I love Aaron Judge. I mean, look what he's doing. It's unbelievable. So they film you, they put you split screen, they put Aaron. That's what you should look like when you swing. That's style based. I want you to look like Aaron Judge, right? Or I want you to look like Ohtani when you're pitching, blah, blah. This is what we want you to see. Well, when you do style-based coaching, you're assuming that the person in front of you can physically do what that athlete you just put up on the screen can do. How many people have the physical abilities of, let's say, Tiger Woods to do his swing, right? I mean, Tiger Woods doesn't even have that physical ability anymore, right? So most people would need surgery to do what Mike Trout is doing or what Aaron Judge is doing, right? But still, the coaches put that model up there, and it's a frustration because the athlete's like, I can't do it. I don't know what's wrong with me mentally. It's nothing mental. You just can't physically do it. And that's the worst type of coaching. Is you literally should be trying to figure out what's the most efficient swing for you to do, the efficient way to pitch. And that's based on what you can physically do, right? So, you know, I always feel like if we go and look at athletes, rotary athletes, and we take away style, just get rid of style. There's a million different ways to pitch. There's a million different ways to hit. We now know that most of these athletes create power and transfer power through their body almost exactly the same, right? So if I take a look at like Jim Furyk, who's got one of the ugliest swings on PGA Tour history, and Tiger Woods, one of the most prettiest swings, I can tell who is who from the Goodyear blimp. But if I put them under motion capture and I look at how they create power and how they transfer power, Mike, it's like identical. I mean, it's absolutely identical. So rotary athletes create power, transfer power, almost exactly the same. the only subtle differences that we see, throwing versus striking. There's a couple, obviously there's the arm component that comes in, right? So obviously your tennis serve, your baseball pitching, and even the windmill fast spit softball, there's going to be a couple nuances, differences there that they're different than where similarities like ground strokes, forehand, backhand, golf, hockey, baseball swinging, those are all almost identical, right? Now, there are some movement unique things. We're all rotary athletes, how they create power and transfer power, it's almost identical.
All right, so as we're winding down, I got one question. We're going to go back to the 9-year-old that kind of got this all started. You also have a very cool way that you go about long-term athletic development with the TPI Juniors program. I remember one of the first times we connected, we spoke together at one of the FMS summits, and you did a great presentation on junior development. So how are we currently screwing that up in both the skill side and the performance side with young kids, and what are some simple things we can look for and do to change that?
Well, I'll make this real simple. So one of the developers of long-term athletic development, or the developer, is a guy by the name of Istvan Bali. Istvan Bali is on our advisory board at TPI. He was the director of sports for the Hungarian Olympic Committee back in the day. He actually defected to Canada in the Montreal Games and the 80 Games. With a lot of guys like Tudor Bompa from Romania. A lot of people defected to Canada. That's why Canada's been like a leader in LTAD for a long time now. But Istvan says early bloom, early rot, right? And I like that is just that sums up everything that's wrong with junior sports, right? Is I want to win the 13-year-old junior golf championships, right? Guys, tell me who won last year the 13-year-old World Junior Golf Championships.
Can't do
exactly. Nobody cares. Let's go. Who won the Little League World Series last year? Can you name it? I mean, that's a big deal in baseball, right? Nobody cares, right? You know what you cares? Who won the World Series? We know the Braves won. I would like you basically who won the Masters. We know who won the Masters. We know who won. That's what matters, right? For some reason, people have in their head that it's more important to win the 11-year-old championship, 12-year-old championships. Coming from a company that scouts and pays athletes millions of dollars, we don't care what you did when you were 12. We really don't. What's more important is that you are developing into an athlete that can win the Masters or win the US Open. So if you think about it, right, everything you're doing to win the 11-year-old, 12-year-old world championships is probably hurting you from winning the Masters, right? Because the key to youth sports, youth development that we've seen is that you develop the athlete first, and then you develop the sport-specific skills second. Because the one thing we've learned is it's really almost impossible to go back in time. You've got one chance as a parent or as a coach to do this right. And we've learned that as kids age, it becomes much harder to turn them into athletes. We can mold this clay so much better when they're young. So we create the athlete first: strength, power, endurance, explosiveness, all the stuff that goes into athletic development. And then you add the skills on. You know, I always tell my coaches, I'm like, if you had the 12-year-old, let's say junior golf champion, right? And then you had the 12-year-old decathlon winner of the world, right? Best athlete in the world. And you had to risk everything of, I'm going to take one of these kids and try and turn him into the Masters champion. I'm going to tell you right now, the 12-year-old that's only played golf, that has won the 12-year-old championships, in my book, I'm not even going to look at them. I'm going to take the decathlon and I'm going to turn them into Dustin Johnson, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, one of the best golfers in the world. Athlete first, sport-specific second. And that's just so ass backwards, and because it's all about college. Everybody wants a scholarship. You got to develop early. The colleges won't look at you. College is really about winning, because if they don't win, the coaches get fired. So development's very difficult to find. And it's just, it's slowly changing, but man, it's painful to watch.
This is,
I mean, I could talk about this for 20 days, but that's
so could we. We actually had Lee Taft on a couple episodes ago talking about just how broken the youth sports model is, and he had some really cool ideas on how we can change that. But that, like we said, that is a whole nother episode into itself. Mike, anything before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I could do this all day, because this is the stuff that I love learning from, people like Greg. And Greg, I'm gonna hit you up after for some resources on this stuff, because I'm really jazzed up on this. So, but thank you for your time. I've learned a ton throughout this conversation, and we really appreciate it. I know you're somewhere on another part of the world, and God knows what time it is right now, but we appreciate you coming on today. And Eric, I'll let you close us out, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Dr. Rose.
Let me,
always,
guys, before you close it out, I just want to say, hey, I watched your guys' principles on performance video stuff, and just want to say, great job, guys. I love that. And like I said, I'm a chronic learner, and I always enjoy watching you guys, and I appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks for having me on.
That means a lot coming from you. Again, Dr. Greg Rose, go check him out. My TPI, On Base U, Racket Fit, all that good stuff. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been episode 11 of the Principles of Performance podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.